3,681 years before the Battle of Yavin, the resurgent Sith Empire would launch an attack against the Republic and the Jedi Order. Recapturing their ancient homeworld of Korriban and other Outer Rim worlds, these events sparked into full-blown galactic war that would last decades. After years of fighting, the Sith would surprise the Republic and the Jedi with a peace offering, one that they couldn't ignore. With the majority of the Jedi and Republic engaged in peace talks, the Sith had one final move to make. Unleashing an all-out offensive of the Republic capital, with the Jedi Temple as their main target, the Sith decimated Coruscant. Left defending their primary target was the Jedi Master, Ven Zallow. During the ensuing battle, Zallow slayed countless Sith soldiers and Sith Lords before finally confronting Darth Malgus himself. After a fierce lightsaber duel throughout the temple, Zallow was eventually defeated. His fall represented the fall of the Jedi and an undisputed Sith victory. While the twilight of the Jedi was at hand, the Clone War-era Jedi were some of the best the Order had ever created. The Jedi Council consisted of some of the best ever, including Yoda, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ki-Adi-Mundi. Mundi's start with the Jedi was a tad unusual. While most Jedi are recruited as infants, Mundi was brought to the temple at the age of 4. Mundi's potential would be seen quite rapidly, becoming the last Padawan to the Grand Master of the Order, Yoda. While eventually becoming a knight, Mundi's early years were spent protecting his family and supporting Saria's induction into the Galactic Republic. Eventually, however, Mundi would be granted the rank of Master and given a spot on the Jedi Council. Mundi's skills would be perfected in the Clone Wars, leading Republic forces to victory on multiple battlefronts, such as Geonosis and the infamous Battle of Boss Pity. Like most of his peers, Mundi was one of the first casualties of Order 66, being gunned down by his own troops during the Battle of Maigito. Master Mundi wasn't forgotten, however, and his achievements and impact on the galaxy was felt for years.
Our predicament is dire, but do not despair. Focus. We are Jedi.
Ven Zallow was a human male who appeared to be in his late 30s, early 40s, and was in his physical prime. Like all Jedi, Zallow was at his species' peak level of physical fitness, possessing ridiculous levels of speed, strength, and dexterity. His strength was one of his most advanced physical traits, even matching Darth Malgus, who was known for his brute strength in their duel in the temple. His speed was also nothing to take lightly, as he was able to speed blitz 2 Sith Lords and Lord Ardras, who was a well-respected warrior. Zallow's durability was also second to none, shrugging off kicks and other physical strikes, and even more impressive, able to tank a force blast and still get up and fight. Zallow was, in my opinion, an above-average Jedi Master physically. He had all the physical tools, and as a cherry on top, he could take a hell of a beating and still get up and fight. Ki-Adi-Mundi was a 73-year-old male Saurian who still appears to be in his physical prime. Saurians were near humans, but had a couple slight differences, the most obvious being the enlarged skull, which housed 2 brains. In order to pump enough blood to the 2 brains, Saurians were also equipped with 2 hearts. The extra brain enabled them to process information and solve problems rapidly, and also provided a highly advanced capacity for concentration and meditation. Though the quick-thinking Saurians had equally quick reflexes, they were commonly not as well coordinated as humans. And due to the weight of their enlarged skulls, Saurians often had back problems. As a Jedi Master, Mundi compensated for said weaknesses throughout his rigorous training, and his species has clearly not hampered his abilities at all, as seen in his work throughout the Clone Wars. In terms of specific physical traits, Mundi specialized in durability and stamina. Much like Master Zallow, Mundi has taken shots in combat and gotten right back up, the most prominent example being him getting up and continuing the fight after being in a crash landing. Mundi also featured relatively advanced speed, being able to dodge blaster fire, and even a Krayt Dragon, one of the most deadly creatures in all of Star Wars. Mundi was an overall well-rounded physical specimen, and his ability to shrug off a hit was second to none. Both Jedi Masters are incredibly gifted physically, and seem to be in their physical primes. While normally in the situation with a human versus a non-human, the non-human gets the edge due to that species' inherited traits, this matchup is not the same, as I see these two species as relative equals. In terms of speed, Zallow gets the edge. It's not to say Mundi isn't fast, it's just not his primary focus. Reflex-wise, Mundi gets the edge due to his species' advanced brain power. Durability-wise, I would say the pair are equals, as both have shown they are capable of getting their asses beat and continuing to get up and fight. And concerning strength, I would have to say that the pair also are equals, possessing nothing more than your average master's strength. While you could argue that Mundi's endurance is more advanced than Zallow, to me, it isn't enough to grant him the advantage. For the most part, these two are on par with no definitive advantages or disadvantages. No edge will be given for physical attributes. A well-respected Jedi Master and the appointed guardian of the Jedi Temple, Ven Zallow was one of the most accomplished duelists of his era. During the Sith sacking of Coruscant, Zallow was credited with killing at least 6 Sith warriors present during the attack, as well as hordes of Sith troopers and commandos. Zallow also confronted the acclaimed Sith warrior Lord Adras, and if not for the intervention of Darth Malgus, likely would have defeated him. Malgus himself even recognized Zallow's skill as a combatant, claiming Zallow was the only Jedi present in the temple who could seriously challenge him. While he did go on to lose his duel with Malgus, Zallow pushed him throughout the entire fight, only losing when Zallow tricked him into exposing himself after pretending to be stunned by a strike to the face. While Master Zallow's preferred style is never stated, it's quite obvious to me which form he specializes in. His clear preference for acrobatics and unpredictable quick blade work screams Form 4 Ataru. Form 4 Ataru was the most physically demanding of all lightsaber forms, and quite an aggressive style. It was characterized by force-assisted acrobatics, such as somersaults and leaping strikes, both for attack and defense. Another characteristic of the form was its fast, powerful strikes from multiple directions. Zallow's approach to the style was similar to that of Master Yoda, favoring Ataru's core teachings, the Su-Ma rotation. While in combat, Zallow was described as a blur of precision and speed. He combined powerful sweeping attacks with advanced acrobatics and spins. He even utilized his momentum from one attack to set up another. Or he just used his agility outright to dodge an incoming attack altogether. His technique was further advanced by his use of unarmed physical combat. The best example of this can be seen during his duel with Malgus. Essentially, Zallow represents what many Form 4 users bring to the table: intensity, speed, and unpredictability. He also relied on speed-based flurries and acrobatic evasions to get inside an opponent's defenses and cut them down. Ven's style essentially represents what the Order became during the Great Galactic War, and to an extent the Clone Wars hundreds of years later. The focus was on battlefield engagements and offense, not one-on-one confrontations and defense. And when these confrontations did happen, more often than not the Jedi were outmatched by their evil Sith brothers. Defensively, Zallow wasn't lacking, it just wasn't his focus as mentioned earlier. This is primarily due to the sheer amount of attacks he could produce, which hindered an opponent's ability to break his defenses. When he actually had to defend, Zallow utilized his inherent speed and agility to anticipate and outmaneuver an enemy's assault. Another thing worth mentioning is, in my opinion, as the fight progresses, Zallow gets predictable. He is the embodiment of a good offense is a good defense, relying on the sheer amount of attacks he uses to hinder an opponent from countering. This isn't to say he's a bad duelist, it couldn't be farther from the truth. The greatest testament to his skill was how he was defeated. As stated earlier, Darth Malgus, one of the best Sith of his era, couldn't beat him outright and instead had to rely on trickery. Unlike many Form 4 specialists, Ven didn't have tunnel vision and was aware of the surroundings around him, often utilizing them to his advantage. While Master Zallow hasn't been seen using force powers against trained force wielders, on the front lines against average soldiers, he often made use of telekinesis. On the whole, Zallow's style represented the tools needed for the time. Large-scale conflicts with multiple adversaries, not the traditional one-on-one engagement. While not as accomplished as Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi was considered to be one of the best swordsmen in the Jedi Order. His lightsaber prowess was particularly demonstrated during his duel with General Grievous on Hypori, where he not only survived the fight, but was the only one out of 6 Jedi to still be standing by the end of the conflict. Despite getting disarmed and nearly killed, Mundi was able to successfully defend himself against a combat style, which had never been seen before by any Jedi, as Hypori marked Grievous's first appearance against a Jedi who lived to recall the experience. Even more impressively, he was fatigued and had his force augmentation greatly weakened by the deaths of the Jedi around him, and still lived to tell the tale. Likewise, Mundi engaged the Dark Jedi Asajj Ventress on Coruscant, and not only survived the duel, but fought Ventress to a stalemate and forced her to retreat, both combatants being some of the most notable Jedi killers in galactic history. Considering he was the last official Padawan of Grandmaster Yoda, it is appropriate that Mundi's preferred style was Form 4 Ataru. He was so proficient in this form that he was second only to Yoda and rivaled only by Aiden Kolar. Form 4 Ataru was the most physically demanding of all lightsaber forms, and was characterized by force-assisted acrobatics such as somersaults and leaping strikes, both for attack and defense. Another characteristic of the form was its fast, powerful strikes from multiple directions. Mundi was also very skilled in the second form of lightsaber combat, Makashi. While never confirmed, I think it's safe to say that Mundi hybridized Forms 2 and 4, like Shock T. However, where T used Ataru to gain better positioning, Mundi used it to launch a direct assault. Mundi's incorporation of Makashi can clearly be seen by the distinct one-handed grip. Mundi combined the dynamic blade work of Ataru with the more economical thrusts of Makashi. Form 2 Makashi was developed purely for blade-on-blade fencing. It was known for its precision and efficiency, with elegant and focused blade work. The form was also based on balance and advanced footwork to outmaneuver opponents. His use of Form 2 can also be seen with his use of shims. A shim was a more minute wound to an opponent by the edge of the lightsaber blade. It was considered inferior and a sign of desperation or struggle against a potent enemy. However, in use by a lightsaber master, this was regarded as either a taunt by a superior enemy or a mobilizing technique to stop a foe. The best example of this can be seen in Attack of the Clones, where Dooku performs 2 back-to-back against Obi-Wan Kenobi. Mundi was also very keen on incorporating unarmed physical strikes into his lightsaber sequences. This does make a lot of sense too, as Ataru was a discipline that focused on using the entire body as an offensive weapon. He has displayed these skills on multiple occasions, and has even used grapples and throws, not just your typical straightforward punches and kicks. Ki-Adi has also been credited with having proficient skill in Form 3, the all-defensive form Surisu. Surisu was developed during the widespread emergence of blasters as an offensive weapon, essentially a development on Form 1 blast-deflect training. Surisu relied on tight blade work and subtle dodges to provide maximum defensive coverage, as well as minimizing exposure to ranged weaponry. While the level at which Mundi uses the form is debated, I believe him to be competent with it, having used it to deflect against blaster fire throughout the Clone War, and against General Grievous. Offensively, Mundi was an all-out offensive weapon, utilizing his high-octane assault of Ataru, powerful physical strikes, and the subtle proficient work of Makashi to overwhelm and overpower his opponent. Defensively, Mundi would rely on Form 3 to repel his opponent's attack, then use the acrobatics of Form 4 to gain an advantage where he could once more go on the offensive. It is also worth mentioning that Mundi was capable of incorporating force attacks into his lightsaber sequences. However, he seemed to only use them when pushed to his limits. Tactically, I don't want to say Mundi isn't capable because he is. You're not a general if you're not somewhat tactically inclined. While he has led troops to victory on many battlefields, his courage sometimes got the best of him, and his lack of humility is something many have criticized him for. While Mundi would make an excellent boots-on-the-ground general, boosting his troops' morale, he often put himself in situations where he was clearly outmatched, instead of stepping back and reassessing the given situation, such as on Hypori.
Everyone out! No! We must pursue!
General, we can't. The survivors will die. We have no time.
On the whole, Ki-Adi-Mundi was a well-rounded lightsaber combatant. He had most situations covered with his use of Forms 2 through 4, and it should also be worth mentioning that General Grievous targeted him in particular during their engagement, signifying his incredible skill with the blade. Mundi was truly one of the best of his era, and if he was taken lightly, it would prove to be one's downfall.
65, Skywalker.
Sorry?
My total, 65. So what do I win?
My everlasting respect, Master Mundi.
Oh, that is a gift Anakin rarely bestows, I assure you.
Both Ven Zallow and Ki-Adi-Mundi were considered and deserved their titles as Master Swordsmen. That being said, I believe their styles to be fairly similar. Both duelists were Ataru specialists that preferred the head-on duel, where Ven utilizes fast attacks one after another with advanced acrobatics, pressuring his opponent and getting inside their defenses, ending them quickly. Mundi favored a more strength and power approach to beat his opponents, rather than an all-out speed blitz. The determining factor for this round is Zallow's relative defensive holes. While he is no doubt competent defensively, as this fight progresses, Ki-Adi, already familiar with his style, would have no difficulties picking up on what Ven was doing. Mundi, in my opinion, would also be capable of withstanding the offensive flurries Zallow would throw to begin. If Mundi could spar and keep up with the offensive output of Yoda, I think it's safe to say he can do the same against Zallow, though that is just pure speculation on my part. Offensively, Mundi I feel could also pressure Zallow. While his strength isn't near the same level as Darth Malgus, he did utilize a powerful head-on assault similar to Malgus. In the end, Mundi is capable of holding off Zallow, and as the fight progressed, would be able to pick up on Zallow's moves. While Zallow takes Form 4 to its highest levels, he can only go as far as the style will let him. On the contrary, Mundi has other disciplines which enhance his ability as an overall fighter, and compensate for Ataru's main flaws. It may take some time, but I am relatively confident in saying that Ki-Adi-Mundi would eventually be able to mount an offensive with his deadly, direct, and accurate blade work. Ki-Adi-Mundi gets the edge. Ven Zallow was equipped with a single-bladed green lightsaber. The weapon featured a bulky grip in the middle of the weapon and had an emitter shroud at the top of the weapon. Master Zallow's lightsaber was of greater heft and length than that of his Padawan Aaron Lanier, who later acquired and kept the weapon after it was discovered in the rubble of the leveled Jedi Temple. Powering the saber was most likely a single green Elam crystal. Along with his weapon, Zallow wore a set of Jedi battle armor. While the specifics of Zallow's armor are never stated, we can compare it to Jedi Master Chaos and Durach's, as the two are eerily similar. The armor could defend against minor blaster shots and other melee weapons. While the armor could take a hit from a lightsaber, a dedicated strike would still be fatal.
You assumed no force could challenge you. And now... finally, we have returned.
Ki-Adi-Mundi wielded a single-bladed blue lightsaber. The weapon featured hand grips in the center and top of the weapon. It was a relatively standard design and was similar to those of Luminar Unduli, and Kit Fisto. Originally, the weapon was powered by a single purple crystal. However, when Mundi was granted a seat on the Jedi Council, he switched the purple crystal for a single blue Elam crystal. This section in about 95% of my videos is minimal in determining the outcome of a contest, but my love for their weapons keeps me from removing it from my videos entirely. Both Jedi featured standard lightsabers. Zallow, however, is equipped with a set of battle armor, which provided him with more protection than the traditional Jedi robes that Mundi uses. While minimal, you know my theory, some armor is better than none at all. Ven Zallow gets the edge. While never specifically stated, I think it's fair to say that Ven Zallow was trained as a Jedi Guardian, who primarily focused on his skills as a lightsaber combatant. However, Zallow was still a competent Force wielder, and was described in the novel Deceived as one of the most powerful Jedi Masters. During the attack on the Jedi Temple, Darth Malgus even indicated that his and Zallow's strength in the Force were relatively equal at this point in time. While Malgus wasn't truly in his prime yet, he wasn't far off from it, making this feat for Zallow even more impressive. Like the majority of other Force wielders, Zallow was capable of boosting his already impressive physical traits, such as his strength and speed. While his telepathic skills aren't ever stated, I think it's safe to say he was trained in the classic Jedi mind trick, as it was a staple in most Jedi's training. Not to mention, Zallow's own Padawan was skilled in its use, providing more reason to believe he was competent in this ability. Ven was also very skilled in telekinesis. While him using telekinesis wasn't a common occurrence, he was still capable of throwing around lesser beings and breaking through the defenses of other trained Force wielders. This can be seen during the novel Deceived. One Sith warrior fell to him. Another, Lord Adras, landed before him, trying to take Malgus's kill for himself. Adras ducked low and slashed at Zallow's knees. Zallow leapt over the blow and unleashed a blast of energy that sent Adras skidding on his backside across the hall. While Zallow may not have been the most creative in his use of the Force, he took the basic powers of the Jedi and elevated them to the master level. He may have been straightforward, but he was no novice either.
We grew stronger, while you rested in your cradle of power, believing your people were safe and protected. You were trusted to lead the Republic, but you were deceived. As our powers of the dark side have blinded you, you assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
Ki-Adi-Mundi was a powerful Force wielder. Much like Zallow, Mundi wasn't revolutionary in his use of the Force, and seemed to stick with a specific preference in combat. Like most Jedi, Mundi was quite skilled in the use of telekinesis. Telekinesis is a basic neutral Force power, enabling Force sensitives to manipulate their surroundings, often objects and individuals, via the Force. He was more than capable of lifting heavy objects, as shown when he lifted a buried scaff while injured. He was also capable of using powerful Force waves, such as when he sent 5 Tusken Raiders flying, with ease. However, his use of telekinesis was simple, and focused on brute straightforward strength, rather than tactical smarts. To me, there is no better example of this than Ki-Adi's duel with General Grievous. Rather than using the debris to bury or off-balance the General, he instead tried to overpower him outright, leaving a crater behind. In terms of telepathy, Mundi's skill was highly advanced. He was a practiced hand in the Beast Control ability. Beast Control was the Force ability to control an animal. Once calmed, the animal could be used by the Force user in various ways, including as a mount or a guard beast. While never stated outright, I'm sure Mundi had no difficulties using the basic Jedi mind trick. The fact that he can use Beast Control, an advanced version of the basic mind trick, only furthers this speculation. Mundi had a relative understanding of the healing arts. Force healing is a Force technique that can heal wounds and ease pains. Mundi was able to heal his shoulder after an engagement on Tatooine. However, In order to heal himself, Mundi had to meditate, and it took him time. Time he wouldn't have in a duel against Zallow. Mundi's force sense was also very strong. He was the first to point out that Anakin's thoughts dwelled on his mother, and more impressive, was able to sense the presence of Divics and distinguish them from the survivors, despite even the ship's life readings being unable to perform such a feat. While quite impressive, in the midst of combat, this skill is pretty much irrelevant. In their use of the Force, Ven Zallow and Ki-Adi-Mundi are very similar. Both rely on a straightforward approach, using the Force as an asset to their martial skill. In terms of telekinesis, both men can fling objects and beings around with relative ease. What makes this round interesting is Mundi's knowledge of the healing arts. While it is no doubt an asset for Mundi, for him to use this ability, he requires time, and like I mentioned earlier, he wouldn't have that time. Neither are bringing anything out of the ordinary or something the other hasn't been trained to defend against. While Mundi is in my opinion the more skilled all-around Force wielder, in combat he and Zallow are relative equals, with Mundi's advantages coming in ways that don't help him in a one-on-one engagement. No edge will be given for Force abilities. And finally, we've reached the verdict. Let's say this fight takes place on the dune seas of Tatooine, with the winner taking a 7-10 advantage. Which seems to be a recurring theme in my videos, this fight will primarily be a battle of martial prowess. The two would walk towards each other, staring each other down, and after a moment, would ignite their blades. Zallow would make the first move, launching himself at the Saurian master. Zallow would have the early advantage, sending strikes as fast as the eye could perceive. Mundi would utilize Form 3, defending, but he could only do so for a time. As Zallow's blows became more aggressive and precise, Mundi would flip away and launch a telekinetic strike at Zallow. The temple's guardian would be flung across the desert. His eyes would begin to open, the blaring heat from Tatooine's dual suns blasting down on him. A dark shadow would emerge overhead. Zallow rolled out of the way just in time as Mundi's blade went crashing into the sand. Now on the offensive, Mundi would begin to push forward, delivering aggressive power blows, but with accuracy and precision. At one point, he catches the armor of Zallow. Zallow shrugs it off. His armor did most of the work, just a slight burn on his arm. Mundi's assault would continue. Flashes of green and blue lit up the otherwise dead wasteland. As Zallow evaded Mundi's slashes, he knew he was losing. He had to do something. Mustering up all he could, Zallow unleashed all he had. Ataru at its purest form, he utilized acrobatics, and his blade work was fast and aggressive. But Mundi held strong, until eventually he found a hole in Zallow's style. As Master Zallow went for a slash, Mundi began to recognize his movements. Parrying the slash at the last second, he delivered an elbow to the side of Ven's face. Zallow was stunned, and before he could breathe again, he felt a sharp pain in his stomach. He fell to his knees, Mundi standing above him, in victory. This matchup to me primarily came down to if Mundi could weather the early storm, which I believe he can. As the fight would progress, the flaws in Zallow's style would emerge and ultimately become his downfall. While there is a chance the early blitz takes Mundi down, or the sheer amount of strikes he throws off balances Mundi and allows him to take advantage, I don't see it happening more often than not. If Mundi is capable of contending with the Masters of Ataru during his era, an era ripe with Master Swordsmen, he can contend with the level of skill Zallow is bringing. This fight would be brutal, and it would leave both combatants bruised and utterly exhausted, but at the end of the day, Master Mundi would raise his hand in victory. I declare Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi the victor.